Let's bring in NBC's Pentagon correspondent Courtney Cubie in Bahrain, NBC's Ali Rafa from the White House, and also with us, U.S. Special Forces veteran Jason Beardsley. Good to have all of you. Courtney, before we get into the latest news here, Defense Secretary Austin expected to brief the media at any moment. Now this would be, again, his first press conference following his hospital stay. What kinds of questions will he face?
So he's going to get questions about both the situation here in the region, in the Middle East, with Iran, with the strikes in the Houthis, with potential retaliatory strikes in this region. But he will get questions about his health, Anna, because as you mentioned, it's the first time that we've heard from him or really had an opportunity to see him doing anything other than sitting at a table since he returned from his hospitalization. Now, you'll remember, of course, that on January 1st, he was taken to the hospital via ambulance with severe pain. He was diagnosed the next day with having some complications from prostate cancer surgery. But he had not notified anyone, including the White House, about the prostate cancer, about the surgery to remove the cancer, or about his hospitalization. And in fact, despite the fact he was taken on Monday, the White House was not notified until Thursday evening that he had been taken to the hospital and was still in the hospital and had transferred his authorities to his deputy. So a lot of questions here to ask. Some of the huge remaining questions that we are still waiting to hear from Secretary Austin, I don't know if we'll get the answers today, candidly, but hopefully we will, is did he order his staff not to tell the White House that he had been hospitalized, that he had been taken via ambulance, that he in fact had been in the ICU for several days? We'll see if he has an answer to that here today, Anna.
And Ali, the White House has really defended Austin in the face of this controversy. There have been calls for him to testify on Capitol Hill. Does the White House believe, or at least hope, that this is going to put kind of that, cover on all of it, the end of this controversy?
Well, certainly that's something that they're hoping for.
There's still a review.
Oh, I'm sorry, Courtney.
Go ahead, Ali.
Well, Anna, certainly that's something that White House officials are hoping for. We're learning that this press conference was planned in part due to ongoing pressure from White House officials for Austin to appear before Pentagon reporters and the press to answer these questions himself. And as you mentioned, yes, there have been calls for Austin to appear before Congress for a hearing to answer these questions. Still, there are calls for him to resign or for the president to fire him as his defense secretary. But we have heard the president and White House officials repeatedly say that the president has faith in his defense secretary. And Austin himself, shortly after this news broke of his secret hospitalization at Walter Reed Medical Center, he vowed in a statement to do better. So definitely White House officials hoping that when Austin appears at this press conference and answers those questions from reporters, it answers all these issues and questions about the transparency of Austin and, frankly, the Pentagon as a whole, Anna.
And Courtney, of course, the timing is crucial because of what's happening in the Middle East right now. Talk to us about what we know about the new strikes overnight, and do they signal anything about this wider campaign we're expecting?
Yes, so the strikes overnight were against the Houthis in Yemen, and these are some of the strikes that we've been talking about over the past several weeks that we would characterize as dynamic or maybe even preventative strikes. So it happens when the U.S. sees something that could be an immediate or imminent threat to U.S. assets or commercial ships in the region, and they go in and they take it out very quickly. And why that's really different than what we've seen with these pre-planned larger strikes against the Houthis or even in Iraq or Syria is the commander in the region has the authority to take those strikes very quickly in the name of self-defense. So that's what we saw last night. There was a potential threat to commercial shipping, the U.S. military taking it out. We've seen more of those than the pre-planned strikes. But I think it's really important to point out to our viewers that we've been talking so much over the last several days about the possibility for some retaliatory action after that deadly attack in Jordan on over the weekend. This is not the beginning of that, of that retaliatory action. In fact, this is completely separate from that, Anna.
Separate but related, obviously, same region. Again, the Houthis being another Iranian-backed militia group in the region. And so, Jason, we're learning the retaliatory attacks against the Iran-backed militants involved in the attack at the Jordan base where U.S. officials or U.S. soldiers were killed, that could be a campaign that could last weeks. And it follows months of these hostilities there in the Red Sea with the Iran-backed Houthis. So all these different Iran-backed groups seem to be empowered right now. Why do you think that is?
Well, and I think you were smart to point out that these are all kind of linked together. It'd be nice if we could separate them and isolate each incident from each other. I think it's valuable, first and foremost, that we respect and honor the sacrifice of the service members that were killed in Jordan. But the complexities here in this region are broad and they're deep. And so the premonition that we'll have a campaign or something that is larger and greater in scope puts this conversation into context with those complexities. We have U.S. forces in harm's way in isolated regions with very, let's call it minimal force protection measures. And those force protection measures are being stretched every day. We're taking shots from drones, from missiles, from Houthis, from Iranian-backed militia groups within Iraq. So this becomes extremely complex. And based on, essential military principles, an advantage we ought to be taking in the region is repositioning those forces so that they are not becoming the sort of bait and trap targets that I think Iran seeks, or at least the militias that are backed by Iran are seeking to score hits on. So this is going to be it's always a balancing act in the Middle East. The more complex it becomes, the more we're going to require strategic insights that are actually nested together with these kinetic strikes. A kinetic strike alone is not enough here.
But Jason, you talk about repositioning people. And I would assume that U.S. assets and personnel are already strategically positioned, no?
This gets complex. I've done this. I've been at the edge of these places where forward operating bases are in outpost areas with sort of an advise and assist type mission where we're using the forces in Iraq to try to extend the influence of the Iraqi government. But what's happening now is those forces are now becoming isolated, and those now become targets. And I see the secretary taking the podium there. But as we get into that discussion, we can talk a little bit more about what is strategic versus what is tactical. In this case, leaving forces out there alone is not as strategic as it could be.
Jason, thank you. Everybody, please stand by.